A tranquil April evening in 2005 in the suburbs of Durham, North Carolina, was shattered by a frantic call to 911. A male voice, trembling with emotion, informed the dispatcher, "My wife, she isn't breathing." Initially, he claimed she had suffered gunshot wounds, though it later emerged that she had been stabbed. Thus began a tale that would not only shake the local community in the years to come but also captured the attention of the entire nation. Janet Christensen was born on June 19, 1979, in a small town in Virginia. She was the seventh of 10 children in a deeply religious Mormon family. From an early age, the girl's life was shaped by two powerful forces: a large, loving family and the strict religious traditions of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Janet distinguished herself among her peers. Not only was she an intelligent and diligent student, but she also exhibited remarkable athletic prowess. The girl successfully balanced her studies with basketball, soccer, and swimming. Her energy seemed boundless, allowing her to juggle training, academics, and the time spent with her numerous nieces and nephews. A defining trait of Janet's character was her openness to others. She effortlessly connected with both longtime acquaintances and strangers alike. Yet, she never wavered from her religious convictions, which formed the bedrock of her worldview. Janet dreamed of having a large family of her own, akin to the one in which she had been raised. Her academic achievements and athletic accomplishments did not go unnoticed. Upon graduating from high school, Janet was afforded the opportunity to continue her education at the University of Southern Virginia, where she became a member of the university's soccer team. This decision would later shape the course of her life, though at the time, she was unaware of its significance. At university, Janet emerged as a multifaceted individual. Despite a demanding schedule of classes and practices, she found time for an active social life. Her sincerity and kindness drew people to her, and soon she became the heart of any gathering. Nevertheless, she always remained mindful of her religious beliefs and moral principles, which guided her in all aspects of life. No one could have predicted that this vibrant, life-affirming young woman would become a victim of a brutal crime, and that her story would evolve into one of the most convoluted criminal cases in North Carolina. The year 1998 marked a turning point in Janet's life. During a soccer match at the University of Southern Virginia, she met Raven Abaroa, a player on the men's team. This encounter seemed perfect. The young man was also a Mormon and shared her religious views. He captivated Janet with tales of his missionary journey to Peru and his devotion to faith. It would later be revealed that these stories were fabrications. Raven did not even possess a passport. Their relationship developed rapidly. Raven presented himself as a considerate and caring suitor. For Janet, this was her first serious romance, and she fully immersed herself in the new relationship. Friends noted how much she had changed now. All her free time was devoted to Raven. Over the course of 2 years, their bond deepened. Raven skillfully crafted the image of the ideal partner for a religious girl from a conservative family. He attended church services, adhered to all necessary traditions, and made a favorable impression on Janet's family. In 2000, when Janet turned 20 and Raven was 19, he proposed to her. Despite their youth, no one in the family expressed doubts about this decision. After all, the young couple appeared to be a perfect match, united by shared values and faith. The wedding took place in August 2000 at a Mormon temple in Washington, D.C. It was a solemn ceremony that adhered to all religious canons. The newlyweds looked happy and confident about their future. No one present could foresee that behind the flawless facade of this marriage, troubling signs would soon begin to emerge. After the wedding, the couple settled in southeastern Virginia, where both found employment at a sporting goods store. This was a time when their lives seemed stable and promising. However, fate had a new twist in store for them. Both were offered better positions at a store branch in Durham, North Carolina. The decision to relocate was not made lightly. It meant leaving behind their familiar surroundings, friends, and family. Yet, the prospect of career advancement outweighed their hesitations. The young couple purchased a home in the suburbs of Durham and embarked on a new chapter of their lives, filled with hope and expectations. The facade of their perfect marriage began to crumble just a few years after their move to Durham. Although everything appeared to be going well on the surface, the young couple had stable jobs, a home of their own, and seemed happy. The reality was starkly different. The year 2003 proved to be a turning point in their relationship. Raven confessed to Janet about his numerous infidelities. He did not merely have one mistress, it turned out he was simultaneously involved with several women. Among them was 17-year-old Annabelle Haviza, with whom Raven spent time, using a separate phone SIM card to conceal his connections from his wife. The confession was accompanied by a declaration of his desire to leave the marriage. Raven even temporarily moved out, leaving Janet to grapple with this crisis alone. The situation was further complicated when, shortly after the revelations of his betrayals, Janet discovered she was pregnant. For a deeply religious woman, this was a profound trial. On one hand, her faith disapproved of divorce; on the other, the prospect of single motherhood was daunting. Janet found herself in a difficult position. She still loved her husband but could no longer trust him. During this period, support came from unexpected sources: neighbors with whom Janet had formed friendships in Durham. They not only provided her with moral support but also attempted to influence Raven, urging him to change his behavior and remain faithful to his pregnant wife. Under pressure from those around him and perhaps feeling a sense of responsibility for the impending child, Raven returned home. He promised Janet that he would never betray her again. Hopeful for a better future and guided by her religious convictions, she decided to give their marriage a second chance. However, the atmosphere in the family would never return to what it once was. Janet tried to live day by day, never knowing what to expect from her husband. The only solace for her was the impending arrival of her child and the dreams of motherhood she had always cherished. On October 17, 2004, a son, Caden, was born into the Abaroa family. His arrival was a ray of light in a complicated situation. Janet devoted herself entirely to motherhood, finding in it her calling and solace. For her, her son became the center of her universe, and it was through him that she found the strength to move forward. Yet, the joy of motherhood was overshadowed by persistent financial troubles. The young family struggled to make ends meet. The situation was so dire that their landlord, understanding the family's plight with a newborn, granted them a 2-month extension on their rent. The church community also extended a helping hand. The couple received a personal loan from the church. This was an important support, but it did not resolve all their issues. Janet and Raven continued to work at the sporting goods store, striving to meet the family's basic needs. During this time, Janet began to notice troubling changes in her husband's behavior. Later, her best friend would testify that Janet suspected Raven of having mental health issues due to his sudden mood swings and aggression. Even during calm periods, she constantly awaited the re-emergence of his darker side. Despite everything, Janet endeavored to create a stable and happy environment for her son. She enrolled Caden in preschool, established a daily routine, and sought to maintain a cozy atmosphere at home. Her dedication to motherhood and care for her child inspired admiration in all who knew her. However, beneath the facade of a well-ordered household lay serious problems. In her last conversation with her best friend, which took place on the day of her murder, Janet evaded direct questions about whether Raven treated her well. Instead, she consistently redirected the conversation to Caden, as if trying to shield him from the troubling reality. December 2004 marked the onset of a rapid decline for the Abaroa family. When Caden was merely 2 months old, Raven was arrested for shoplifting at the store where the couple worked. The investigation revealed that he had embezzled goods worth over $9,000. He operated methodically, ordering athletic shoes, arranging for their delivery to their home address, and subsequently selling them online under the alias Footballer Guy. The scheme unraveled when the supplier contacted the company regarding unpaid merchandise. A verification of the delivery addresses swiftly led to Raven. He was promptly dismissed, and the case was referred to the courts. Although Janet was not involved in the thefts, she also left her job due to shame and humiliation. Raven managed to evade prison time. He was sentenced to 2 years of probation and ordered to pay restitution of nearly $10,000. For a family already in dire financial straits, this became an additional burden. Finding new employment with a criminal record proved to be a daunting challenge. In early 2005, Janet learned of her second pregnancy. She confided this news only to her closest friends, including Katie Chick. According to her testimony, Janet was exceedingly anxious. Not because she did not desire a second child, on the contrary, she dreamed of a large family, but rather due to her concerns about Raven's potential reaction, given their precarious financial situation. During this period, Raven took a step that would later raise many questions for investigators. He took out a life insurance policy on Janet for $500,000. Despite their severe financial difficulties, he consistently paid the premiums. This decision seemed peculiar, especially considering that the couple had not previously held such insurance policies. Tensions within the family escalated. Janet increasingly complained to her friends about her husband's aggressive behavior. She feared his sudden outbursts of anger and unpredictable reactions. Nevertheless, loyal to her religious convictions and thinking of the children, she clung to her marriage. April 26, 2005, began like any other day. Janet picked up Caden from daycare and returned home. In the evening, the couple was scheduled to meet with a member of their church community. After the meeting, they returned home, and around 8:30 p.m., Raven prepared to leave for a football match in Morrisville. According to Raven, when he left the house, Janet was getting ready for bed. However, this detail would later become one of the key elements of the investigation. Before departing, Raven did something unusual. He locked the 2 household dogs in the shed. This was out of character, as the dogs always slept indoors, in special crates under the kitchen table. Janet, who often found herself home alone, valued the presence of the dogs. They provided her with a sense of security. Neighbors reported that the evening was quiet. No suspicious sounds or cries were heard. Around 10:00 p.m., Raven returned home. He claimed that the house was dark and silent. Ascending to the second floor, he discovered Janet lying on the floor in an unnatural position. In a call to 911, Raven was in a state of panic. He reported that his wife was not breathing and initially claimed to see gunshot wounds. When paramedics arrived, they found that Janet had died from multiple stab wounds. 6-month-old Caden was unharmed in his crib in the adjacent room. An autopsy revealed that Janet had sustained 3 deep stab wounds. One was on her left arm, a typical defensive wound. The second was to her chest, while the fatal blow was to her neck, severing an artery. The coroner also confirmed Janet's second pregnancy, a fact known only to a few of her closest friends. There were no signs of struggle or forced entry at the crime scene. Only Raven's laptop and a few kitchen knives were missing from the house. Janet's wedding ring and other jewelry remained untouched on her vanity. Everything indicated that the victim knew her assailant or willingly let him into the home. The Durham police immediately launched an investigation. Crucial evidence was discovered at the crime scene: a bloody shoe print, a fingerprint, and traces of blood. Detectives noted several suspicious details: the absence of signs of a break-in, the disappearance of only the laptop and knives, and the dogs locked in the shed. Initially, Raven cooperated actively with the investigation, but his behavior raised suspicions. He informed Janet's family of her death, asserting that she had committed suicide, a version that sharply contrasted with the evidence uncovered. The Christensen family categorically rejected the possibility of suicide, knowing Janet's deep religious faith and her devotion to her son. A few days after the murder, Raven took a step that further alarmed investigators. He packed his belongings, took Caden, and moved to Utah, where his family resided. Moreover, he sought to claim the insurance payout even before Janet's funeral. Investigators discovered that the day before the murder, April 25, Raven had backed up all the data from his laptop onto CDs. Janet's sister, Sonia, found these disks while sorting through belongings. This seemed a curious coincidence. Just a day before the laptop was stolen, the owner had preserved all vital information. However, there were also contradictory elements in the case. The shoe print found at the crime scene did not match Raven's footwear. The bloody fingerprint also did not belong to him. Additionally, he had an alibi. Several witnesses confirmed his presence at the football match during the time of the alleged murder. The investigation was complicated by inconsistencies in Raven's own statements. In conversations with the police, he claimed to have found Janet already dead. However, to church community member Michael Guzman, he recounted a different version. Allegedly, when he found his wife, she was still alive and asked him, "Why does it hurt so much?" In Salt Lake City, Utah, Raven began to construct a new life. Having received the $500,000 insurance payout, he settled with his son in the new city. Soon, he met Vanessa Pond, a single mother whose daughter attended the same daycare as Caden. Raven proved to be a persistent suitor. Initially, Vanessa, who had raised her child alone for 5 years, was not interested in a relationship. However, the charismatic Raven managed to win her trust. He told her that his wife had died but avoided details. Vanessa, enchanted by his attention and care for her son, did not press for specifics. Janet's family, closely monitoring Raven's life, learned of his new relationship and attempted to warn Vanessa. They reached out to her and shared the truth about Janet's violent death and Raven's status as the prime suspect. However, Vanessa, already emotionally attached to Raven, believed his version that the police and Janet's family were unjustly pursuing him. Raven assured Vanessa that he was actively cooperating with the investigation and seeking to find the true murderer. In reality, he ignored police inquiries and did not participate in the search for the criminal. He never offered a reward for information about the murderer and did not organize any memorial events for Janet. In the summer of 2008, 3 years after Janet's death, Raven and Vanessa married. However, the honeymoon revealed troubling signs. According to Vanessa, during their wedding trip, a drunken Raven constantly spoke of Janet's death, repeating that he was very angry. He never expressed sorrow or grief, instead promising Vanessa, "I will never hurt you." Raven's second marriage quickly began to mirror the patterns of the first. Vanessa became a victim of his sudden outbursts of anger and emotional abuse. As with Janet, Raven could swiftly transition from rage to feigned remorse, from cruel words to apologies. The turning point came on Christmas Eve 2008. During an argument, Raven locked Vanessa in the bathroom, threatened her, and declared that he hated her and did not care if she died. Following this, he seized Caden and stormed out of the house, shouting, "Come on, we don't need Mom anymore." The marriage lasted only 4 months. After the divorce, Vanessa decided to publicly share her experience. In an interview, she recounted a troubling episode when she asked Raven's parents about Janet's death. When directly questioned if he had killed his first wife, Raven evasively replied, "I loved my wife." Meanwhile, Janet's case remained unsolved. The Christensen family continued their fight for justice, but the investigation had reached a standstill. The only active party in the pursuit of truth remained the family of the deceased. In an effort to clear his name, Raven gave an interview to the program North Carolina Wanted. He denied any involvement in the murder of Janet and asserted his desire for a more thorough investigation. However, his demeanor during the interview raised further suspicions. He spoke more about himself than about his deceased wife. During this period, detectives uncovered another troubling fact. Prior to the murder, Raven had kept their dogs caged inside the house. Yet, on the night of the tragedy, he abruptly altered this routine, locking them in the shed. Investigators speculated that this was a deliberate act to prevent the dogs from defending Janet or alerting the neighbors with their barking. In 2009, the case was handed over to a new detective, Charles Soule. He began to examine the investigation materials with a fresh perspective and noticed a detail that had previously been overlooked: a contact lens case on Janet's vanity. The family confirmed that Janet never went to bed wearing contact lenses. It was a steadfast ritual she adhered to rigorously. However, Raven claimed that when he left for a football game, his wife was already preparing for sleep. This discrepancy prompted Detective Soule to dig deeper. He made the bold decision to petition for the exhumation of Janet's body. The family supported this decision, and in July 2010, the procedure was carried out. During the examination, fragments of contact lenses were discovered in Janet's eyes, preserved even after 5 years of burial. To validate the reliability of this evidence, ophthalmologist Charles Curling conducted a unique experiment. He learned the embalming technique from a North Carolina funeral home and performed studies with 2 sets of pig eyes that had contact lenses. The eyes were embalmed, wrapped in burial cloths, and buried 6 feet underground. The first set was retrieved after 6 months, and the second after a year. In both instances, the lenses were found to be preserved, albeit wrinkled and discolored exactly like the lenses found in Janet's eyes. This scientifically confirmed that she was not preparing for sleep at the time of her murder. Detective Soule also discovered that Raven had stopped at a store on his way home the night of the murder. Surveillance footage showed him dressed differently than when the police arrived at his home, indicating he had time to change clothes. On February 1, 2010, Raven Abaroa was arrested on charges of first-degree murder. The trial commenced in 2013, drawing significant public and media attention. The courtroom was filled with relatives, friends, and onlookers. The prosecution built its case on a series of circumstantial evidence and testimonies regarding Raven's character. A number of women took the stand, recounting his violent behavior and manipulative tendencies. Vanessa Pond detailed her experience of psychological and physical abuse during their brief marriage. One of the key witnesses was Annabelle Haviza, a former lover of Raven. She spoke of his methodical nature in concealing infidelities and recounted an incident where she deliberately left strands of her hair in his car, fearing for her life. The defense emphasized the absence of direct evidence linking Raven to the murder. They pointed out that the shoe and fingerprint impressions found at the crime scene did not belong to the defendant. There was also an attempt to portray Janet as a woman who might have had romantic entanglements with other men. After 5 weeks of trial, the jury was unable to reach a unanimous verdict. 11 of the 12 jurors voted to convict Raven, but 1 insisted on his innocence. The trial ended in a mistrial. Before the commencement of the second trial in 2014, Raven unexpectedly agreed to a plea deal with the prosecution. He accepted an Alford plea, a particular form of guilty plea in which the defendant does not admit to the crime but acknowledges that the prosecution has sufficient evidence for a conviction. He was sentenced to a term of 95 to 123 months in prison, taking into account the 4 years he had already spent incarcerated during the investigation. On Christmas 2017, at the age of 39, Raven was released. Raven Abaroa's sentence evoked mixed feelings among all those involved in the case. Janet's family deemed the punishment too lenient, considering it involved the brutal murder of a young mother and her unborn child. Vanessa Pond publicly expressed her opinion: "This is not justice. This is not justice at all." Today, Raven lives in Utah as a free man. He has never fully acknowledged his culpability in Janet's death. Through the Alford plea, he managed to maintain a formal stance of innocence, even while conceding that sufficient evidence existed for a conviction. The case of Janet Abaroa transformed the approach to investigating domestic violence in North Carolina. Investigators began to pay closer attention to seemingly minor details that may have previously appeared insignificant, such as the contact lenses in the victim's eyes. There was also an increased focus on the psychological aspects of domestic violence and the importance of documenting changes in the behavior of potential abusers. The story of this crime illuminated several critical issues within the justice system. Firstly, the difficulty of proving guilt in the absence of direct evidence, even with numerous circumstantial testimonies. Secondly, the shortcomings of plea bargain systems, which sometimes allow individuals to evade full accountability for serious crimes. Caden, the son of Janet and Raven, grew up without knowing his mother. The Christensen family continues to honor Janet's memory by sharing stories of her kindness, devotion to faith, and boundless love for her son. They established a foundation in her name to assist victims of domestic violence. This case serves as a cautionary tale about how a charismatic exterior can conceal a dangerous personality, and it is a reminder of the importance of being vigilant regarding early signs of violent behavior in relationships. The case of Janet Abaroa stands as a poignant example of how the justice system grapples with instances of domestic violence, particularly when they culminate in tragedy. Since her murder, significant changes have occurred in the methods of investigating such crimes. The key lessons from this case can be categorized into several areas. The first is the importance of early identification of signs of violent behavior. Raven exhibited alarming signals long before the murder: control, manipulation, infidelity, and sudden mood swings. However, religious beliefs and social pressures often compel victims to remain in perilous relationships. The second lesson pertains to investigative methods. Detective Soule demonstrated the significance of re-examining old evidence with a fresh perspective. His attention to detail regarding the contact lenses and his initiative to conduct a scientific experiment set a new standard for forensic investigations. The third aspect highlights the flaws within the criminal justice system. The Alford plea, while facilitating the avoidance of lengthy trials, can create situations where justice appears incomplete. In Raven's case, it allowed him to receive a relatively lenient sentence while maintaining a formal denial of guilt. Statistics indicate that Janet's case is not unique. Many women lose their lives at the hands of their partners, particularly during pregnancy. This case helped draw attention to the necessity for better protection for victims of domestic violence and the importance of listening to those who report violence in relationships. Today, Janet's story is utilized in training law enforcement as an example of the critical importance of paying attention to the smallest details during investigations and not dismissing any theories, even when the suspect has a seemingly solid alibi.